Welcome to another episode of Southern Arizona's Nonprofits, the superheroes impacting our community. We're broadcasting live today on the Tucson Business Channel, a division of Mark Bishop Media from the Stewart Title corporate offices on Broadway in Tucson, Arizona. And we're brought to you by SCIP, SSCIP, the Social Service Contractors Indemnity Pool, ensuring nonprofits like ours for more than 3.5 decades. I'm Barbara McClure, Executive Director of Impact to Southern Arizona, host of this show, and with me today are two other executive directors who are leading nonprofits doing very important work to help those who are abused by others. Since COVID, cases of domestic abuse have been rising, and Impact has been helping people on a regular basis. Emerge is sending people to Impact for added services, and it's just happening all around you, and you might not even realize it. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming two people who will surprise you with what they're doing. Anthony Young, the Executive Director of Southern Arizona Legal Aid. Thank you, Anthony, for joining me.
Happy to be here.
And also John George with Beauty from Ashes Ranch. And thank you for joining us as well.
Again, thanks for having me here as well.
Sure. I think people will be surprised to find out about both of you. And I think especially what Sala is doing. So Anthony, I was going to start with you because Anthony and I actually met in about 2010 or 2011 serving on a project action committee to keep people from becoming homeless. And it just seems like that was not that long ago. But
time seems to fly.
That's it. So we've been aware of each other for a long time, and Impact does refer clients to Sala. So maybe you can tell our listeners kind of what it is Sala is, what you do, and what kind of legal aid you give and to whom.
So we are a not-for-profit law firm that provides free legal help to low-income Arizonans, both Arizonans who reside in the respective counties in Arizona, and we cover 9 of Arizona's 15 counties, but we also help Native Americans who reside on 11 of the 21 Native American tribes in our state.
Boy, I didn't even know that. That is very cool. I was thinking you were really just Southern Arizona.
No. In fact, we have offices in Navajo County.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. Thank you. So what is the purpose of Sala?
So Southern Arizona Legal Aid is one of 132 legal aid programs across the country and in the territories of the United States. We are federally funded programs that are created to fill the justice gap in America. Most people are not aware that in our country, when one is charged with a crime and at risk of jail or prison time, well, there's a right to a lawyer in those cases. But if one is a victim of family violence, victimized by a consumer fraud, or at risk of an abusive landlord, there's no right to a lawyer. Many people get sued by debt collection agencies all the time, and when that occurs, they're on their own. Legal aid is the answer for that population.
That is great because I know we deal with a lot of that type of client who are victims of other people. And you're right. It never even occurred to me that they don't have an automatic right. Well, not that they don't have a right to legal help, but they don't have access to it.
They don't have access. It's an issue of access.
So that is interesting. And then I know we've talked recently because when we met, we were working on homelessness and what have you, but I know you've shifted since then to what Sala is focused on, and with our gals that have been coming to us, we've been connecting them with Sala. So maybe you can talk about what your main focus is, or just certain kind of law.
Well, because Sala is the only provider of a full range of civil legal aid services to the poor or to low-income populations in our community, we provide a variety of services that really are determined by our board. So our board of directors sets the priorities for the kinds of legal work we can do each year. And right now we are focused on 5 priority areas. I don't know if you want me to go into that now.
Sure.
I can.
Sure.
So our 5 priority areas are, number 1 is family law. And our family law advocacy is centered around helping survivors of family violence escape the relationship. And so we're using the law, we're using the legal system to help the victim. And in most cases, the victims that we represent are women. And oftentimes there are children involved. And so our goal is to help the survivor and her children escape the violent relationship. And equity in that division so that any marital or community assets are fairly divided, such that the survivor is not, for financial reasons, having to go back to the abuser. And then after that, housing. is our second highest priority. And I say these based on the populations that come to us. The majority of people come to us for family law help and are survivors of family violence. Second in line, and it seems to be a growing number of people, are housing matters. And these are people at risk of eviction or at risk of foreclosure. And our job there is to make sure that the eviction or the foreclosure follows the law. And where the law is not being followed, then our job is to make sure that the law is followed. And so that's the next area. The housing area bleeds over into the consumer protection area. And so we have a unit that also assists people with consumer protection matters. That's the foreclosure area. That's the wage garnishment, and we do bankruptcies for that population. Identity theft cases I was talking about earlier, we help people deal with those kind of financial issues that cause people to be in poverty or remain in poverty. After that, then we have a unit that helps individuals get access to the government benefits they are entitled to.
Oh, nice.
And so these are benefits like Social Security, disability. We don't compete with the bar, so you may see the commercials with private attorneys advertising to do Social Security work. They get those cases, and to the extent they reject them, then legal aid will take those cases. So we tend to get the worst cases in the area of Social Security, but it also includes SNAP benefits, TANF benefits, access benefits, any government benefit that we are, as Americans, are entitled to. When we're denied those benefits, we have a constitutional right to due process and to challenge the agency's decision. And so our role is to make sure that that due process occurs. Then after government benefits, then we provide services to certain undocumented immigrants. Because we receive federal funding, we are regulated in the work we can do. And so the immigrant population is limited to immigrant victims. These are people who've been trafficked into the United States. They've been victimized by random crime in the United States, and prosecutors would like the immigrant to remain in the country to prosecute the crime, or they have been victimized by a U.S. citizen spouse. And our goal there, obviously, is to help the immigrant remain in the United States. But we also put the immigrant on the path to citizenship, getting them work authorization so they can work above the table, and positioning them that they can get their to their green card. We've launched a new area, really two new areas where we're helping low-income populations. One is veterans at risk of homeless or who are homeless. And our goal there is to bring them back for the services I just mentioned, and the one other I'm going to mention in a minute. And now we're including veterans benefits, so helping veterans either get their discharge status changed if they're entitled to an upgrade, or to get them disability benefits or veterans benefits that they're entitled to.
Very nice.
The last area of priority that the board approved and we've received funding for is what we're calling restorative justice. And this is to help ex-offenders get their criminal histories expunged or set aside, and their civil rights, like voting rights, restored. And
Very cool.
Yeah, we just launched that one at the end of this year.
Well, that's exciting, too. I think there's so many people. We have a lot of people who have maybe entered jail, served their time, come out, but they have difficulty finding employment. And we have a lot of partners that we connect with who do employ people with a criminal record, but sometimes it's just hard for them to get their life back on track. And if you're trying to rent an apartment and that's on your record, then you have people who say, oh, I don't want that person living here. So it really becomes crazy for people.
That's great. And so the voters passed a proposition to change our Arizona law to allow for expungement of cannabis or marijuana-related convictions.
Yes.
And that proposition also included the right to set aside convictions related to other crimes and to restore civil rights. And so seeing that the voters did that, and the state of Arizona, putting up funding to help these victims get their rights restored, we decided to step into the void and to provide this service within our 9-county service area.
Well, that's exciting. I don't know how you handle all that. We'll come back to that because I know it must take a giant staff, and I know you have a variety of solutions for that. So thank you, and that's going to be very fun to talk about today. And then, John, I was thinking about you when Anthony was talking about sex trafficking victims. And so, just the title of your nonprofit alone is such an attention grabber, Beauty from Ashes Ranch. So you're clearly helping people who've been through trauma, and I think the audience will be surprised to find out that it is for people who've been sex trafficked, and it's right here. So can you tell us a bit about the organization?
Sure. As you mentioned, Beauty from Ashes Ranch is a nonprofit organization. We're a faith-based nonprofit organization that provides long-term restorative care, a healing facility, and a residential facility for victims or survivors of sex trafficking crimes.
So how do people come to you? How do they find out about you? Or, I mean, I think there's so many people that are sex trafficked that we don't realize.
Right. There's unfortunately a lot of stories of how people come to need services like ours. We partner specifically with a couple of organizations locally. One of them is called Saturn. It's a long acronym, so bear with me. It's Southern Arizona Anti-Trafficking Unified Response Network. It's a conglomerate of law enforcement agencies, DHS, ICE, local PD, sheriff's departments, and so forth, that when a trafficking victim is rescued, they then go out to service provider communities and see if there's space available to house them and get them through a process. So we partner with those type of organizations. There's another one called SAS. It's Southern Arizona Against Slavery. They work on the mental health side of the aisle, and when they come across survivors in their services that they're providing already, then they reach out to the service provider community and see if there's a spot for them to go if they think that they're good candidates for a program.
Very cool. And I know, of course, I think when I first heard about your organization, it didn't have the word ranch on the end.
Right.
Because Sarah, the founder, was recognized at one of our regional Women of Impact luncheons where we bring attention to people in the community that are going above and beyond, maybe working and doing their daily job, but in the background they're volunteering like crazy and coming up with great ideas. So in my head, I think it was just called Beauty from Ashes. Was that it once?
No, I believe it's always had that the ranch on it. So Sarah's vision, first, Beauty from Ashes is biblical. It's Isaiah 61:3. It talks about the premise is that God can restore take our tragedies and turn them into something good, turn them into a testimony that others can learn from and get value out of. And so that's where the Beauty from Ashes come from. The ranch portion of it is Sarah's original vision was to provide a home type setting where survivors could come in and they could get the healing that they need in a home environment in a similar to what she had in her past going to her grandma's ranch, where that was kind of like therapy just by going there and having that nice kind of tucked away place that you can go and just kind of call home and feel like home and have a good, loving environment where the truly healing can actually take place. And that's the vision behind the name. It's biblical, and then the ranch is intentional because we are setting up a ranch. So part of our services, and I'll get into those in a little bit, also include like equine therapy and various other things that are ranch-like. And again, it's based off of our founders' kind of upbringing and background.
And I think ranch to me implies, like quiet and
oh, absolutely,
yeah, exactly, secluded, away from the hubbub and all the right. Craziness. So it does just sound like a great place to go just by the title. So that's very fun. I think there's so many organizations in Tucson, so many different nonprofits doing so many different kinds of work. So what drew you to this organization? How'd you get involved?
Oh, so I've been the executive director since May of this year, so I'm fairly new into the position. My heart is to help. It always has been throughout my life and throughout my career. I've always had that pull to be of assistance somehow. I joined the military at a very young age and served in the military, and then got out. And throughout my rise in the corporate world, I served in various nonprofit organizations. So I've always had that passion to just help. And then I met Sarah and learned about Beauty from Ashes Ranch, and I was admittedly kind of ignorant to how bad sex trafficking is in our world, let alone our own community. And Beauty from Ashes Ranch just kind of opened my eyes to that. And it was something that immediately I felt called to be a part of and to help, and to really be somebody that could take this organization to another level and get it operational, and provide services. I mean, we have an incredible amount of need in our community and in Arizona in general. And while there are a lot of organizations that have the heart and the passion to do this, there's not a lot of long-term care facilities. And really, if you can imagine somebody that's been trafficked their entire life, going to a shelter and getting, a weekend away from the violence, a weekend away from the trafficking situation, they're not going to heal.
Right.
Or going to a facility that provides a healing program but has a timeline associated with it, a 30, 60, 90 day, which is pretty typical. Those short-term facilities really don't allow somebody to unpack that complex trauma that they've accumulated over many, many years of abuse. So the uniqueness of Beauty from Ashes Ranch is really what kind of caught me, and that this is, I won't say it's one of a kind, but it is certainly a very unique service organization that focuses on the ability to truly impact somebody's life and truly get them from the worst possible imaginable situation in life to something where they're on their own and they're taking care of themselves and then their family, and they can start a family and really get back on track. So to me, the ability to have a true impact and a life-changing impact, that draw, and the fact that this is faith-based, and I root a lot of my personal values and my belief in Jesus Christ, that it was the natural fit and my next step, and I'm so blessed to be a part of this organization.
That's great. I think we often, as a society, come up with all kinds of Band-Aid fixes. Just even what you're describing sounds like people who are, get let out of prison. And you're right, there are these 30, 60, 90-day programs as they're on probation, and they set them up. And then day 90, we just had this happen to a client of ours, day 90 came, and zip, he was turned away out of transitional housing, back to homeless. And then now what do you do? And so we're always trying to capture all the solutions in that short window. And sometimes that's just generally not long enough,
right?
Especially for healing.
Sure. And if you're sitting there thinking that I've only got 20 days left, I've only, what does that do for you? I mean, that gets your worry up, that gets you back into a path that could potentially have people starting to think of how they're going to handle the next, days after release. And again, it's the recidivism rate for sex trafficking survivors getting pulled back into the life is extremely high. And that's why we do what we do, and the services we offer is to allow them to break that cycle, because it just really doesn't exist with the current.
Yeah, and I was going to say healing is different for everyone.
Absolutely.
So having a set time doesn't take that into consideration.
You're absolutely right. I mean, everyone comes with their own different set. I mean, they're all tragic, but the stories are all different. And the healing path is different for everybody. And again, it might take somebody 3 months, it might take somebody 2 years. You never know. And again, to not have that as a worry, where my food's going to come from, where's my house going to come from, how am I going to do, you name it, to have that taken away and just given the opportunity to truly sit down and heal. I mean, that's what this is about.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you too about when we are picturing, you made the comment about it's surprising I'm trying to think of the need or what the participation rate or how often it happens in Arizona. I mean, how many people are victims of sex trafficking in Arizona? Do you have numbers?
So I don't have specific numbers. So that's one of the challenges that we have in this, is that there are very unreliable statistics. This is a very, very hard crime to track. A lot of it is because people have to ultimately self-report, and that's not something that a lot of people do. Or they get arrested and they're under such psychological control of their captors that they just don't roll over and they don't talk about it. So it's very, very hard to track. And I know that's one of the frustrating things for the state, because there's no real accurate statistics. There's not a whole lot of, equitable amounts of money put towards solving the crime, which is why service organizations, nonprofit service organizations, have to pick up, where the state can't appropriate and do the services that are truly needed. So we don't know what the actual number for Arizona is, but we know it's a lot. And there was a group, the Safe House Project, that attempted to do a nationwide study, and they kind of characterized every state by how many reported or how many incidents of sex trafficking were reported through the law enforcement community, and they came up with numbers. For Arizona, it's in the hundreds of thousands, which is staggering. I mean, that means there's probably somebody that you know that has been a victim at some point. They also put out that Arizona is about 9th in the U.S. for rates of sex trafficking. But that's, again, to quantify that, that's based off of reported incidents, not the unreported.
Sure.
And there's probably 10 times that go unreported. And then we're about 45th in the U.S. for services that are available to victims. So we have a very high problem, or high rate of incidences, and a very low amount of services available for survivors. So it is a true need in Arizona to help. And again, that's another reason why for me it's just a no-brainer. I have to be a part of this. I have to help. I have to get involved somehow. And as God would have it, I met Sarah, and they were in need of an executive director, and it worked out well.
It sounds like it. Well, it's interesting too. I think being near the border, we have that happening.
Too, yeah.
Sure. I know Pinal County stops a lot of people, catches a lot of people with sex trafficking. And I'll tell you, Impact is located up in Catalina. And we actually had 2 women come running through the front door in the lobby, panicked, and they were yelling that this man was behind them, chasing them. And so our program director happened to be out in the lobby at the time, and she locked them behind a locked door in a hallway. We have a locked hallway in our client wing, and she dialed 911. And so the gentleman finally made it in the door because he didn't know. He was just chasing them through our building is in a residential neighborhood. So, he was just running the streets trying to find them. And she called the 911. She dialed 911. But in the meantime, this gentleman came in the lobby and he said, I'm looking for 2 women. And he was, out of breath, and he'd clearly been chasing them. And she said, well, we have a lot of people who come here. We're a food bank. She's playing just kind of like she has no clue what he's talking about. And he said, I know they're here because they dropped their backpacks in front of the front door. So our program director is very well able to manage those kinds of situations. And so she sent him off. She said, we don't have any women here. I don't know where those backpacks came from. So he left, and she went in to grab the gals because she'd put them in an office just inside. And they, out of fear, had run out the back door. But it turned out what had happened was they were sex traffic victims, and he had pulled up to the light at Oracle and Golder Ranch. And somehow they were able to jump out of the car, and that's a very busy intersection. And they just ran right into the intersection. And then, of course, he had to get through the intersection and get into the market and park and then try to figure out where they went. So, but it was really an interesting moment for our staff and even the clients and the donors and the volunteers who were on the campus that day. They were like, gosh, that happens in our neighborhood? That happens so close to home. So that is interesting. Well, we look forward to learning more from you.
Well, I want to ask John, is there an age, are you seeing an age demographic in terms of the population being exploited?
So for our services, we specifically focus on the 18 to 24-year-olds. And we did that for a number of reasons, primarily because by law, when a youth is picked up, if they've been trafficked and they've been picked up, they go into the DCS system. There's some services that are provided to them. When you're 18, you're on your own. It's literally kind of catch and release, for lack of a better term. They get brought in by a law enforcement officer, and then they go out, and they have really no services. So, and demographically speaking, the 18 to 24-year-old is the highest rate that we're seeing actual like sex trafficking happen. So we were trying to make the biggest impact in the area where there's the most trafficking incidences happen, and then the least amount of services available. So that's kind of why we focus on that age group.
And, I was thinking when you were talking about them, when you said something about people who have been in a lifetime of sex trafficking, I think of people who get picked up and it's a very Hallmark kind of answer, I think, but they get picked up and then somebody eventually finds them and they get rescued and they haven't been in that environment very long. But do you find that there are a lot of people, do you have an average age that you've come across or just a general narrative about what that's like? People come to you, they have been short-term, long-term?
No, unfortunately, I don't. But I will tell you,
recognize you're new. We won't hold you to all those statistics
well, I mean,
yet.
so there's a lot of scenarios, almost as many different scenarios of how somebody becomes a sex trafficking survivor, as there are people that have them. Right, every story is unique. There's some patterns that are followed. A lot online is pulling people in, convincing them that their parents are oppressing them and they need to get out, and then meeting up, and then they become kidnapped. And again, that's a kind of reoccurring thing. But it was shocking to me to find out. And again, this is something that I was completely ignorant of. There are people that have been trafficked since they were very, very young, and what we see, probably alarming, is a lot of incidences of where the family member is actually trafficking their child or somebody in their family. And this is why it's so hard to, when you think of, and I'm speaking for myself, when I thought of like a sex trafficking survivor or victim, I was thinking exactly like you, like they were kidnapped and they're put into the scenario, kept in a locked room, and that's not always the case. That's certainly, there's some of that happening, and you could just imagine that they'd be so gracious and welcoming and wanting to help get out and get the help. A lot of times there's such a psychological hold on the victims themselves. If it's a family member, especially a parent that's trafficking them, they have that loyalty, that bond. And so a lot of times when people are rescued, they don't want the help, or they refuse it, or they are not willing to testify or prosecute their family member because there's that hold on them. And another thing that we see is a lot of the younger girls that are pulled in somehow and are addicted to drugs, and now this is part of their routine. They don't identify their captors or their abusers as that. They call their pimps their boyfriends, and
Sure.
and he's somebody that loves me. He's providing for me. He's giving me the house I need, the drugs I need, the food I need, and therefore they don't always want help right away. So, and again, it's that. It's almost unthinkable to imagine that somebody who's being trafficked wouldn't want help, but we unfortunately do see that, and it's and then there are the ones that have been kidnapped and brought across the border and trafficked for that purpose, that absolutely are ready and need help. But there's so many stories, and they're all tragic. And again, we're not so focused on the introduction part or the prevention part. We're what happens after. When somebody is rescued, that's kind of day one. Or the day that they jump out of a car and decide to run into a building to get help. That's day one. That's where the healing starts and everything, and that's kind of where we come in.
Sure. Well, it's a good thing you're there. My gosh.
And I have to say there's some similarities with legal aid. We see in the family law area, victims coming to us seeking to dissolve their marriages only to reconcile.
Right.
Interesting.
And we've learned that we have to keep our door open. There was a time, and I remember when I was a managing attorney in Yuma, where the need's so great, you really want to help the next person and move on. And the person who comes to you and they say they want help and then they change their mind, then you say, well, go away. We've got all these people in front of us who want help. But I recall having a client get killed because of that. And it really taught me a lesson that we have to be ready as providers when they're ready. And we can't tell them when it's time for them to extricate themselves from that relationship. They have to decide, and then we have to be there for them when they're ready.
That is great. A great story, because it's everywhere. Yeah. Well, this is such a great hot topic this afternoon. So thank you both for joining me. We're going to have a quick break to hear from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back.
Today's program is brought to you by SKIP, the Social Service Contractors Indemnity Pool. SKIP is a member-owned, member-directed insurance provider with more than 3 decades of insuring Arizona social service organizations for their property, general and professional liability, and auto claim exposures. With an Arizona-based staff of claim underwriting and risk management professionals, Skip specializes in providing personalized service, affordable premiums, and coverage which meets and often exceeds the state of Arizona's contract requirements for social service providers. For more information, visit our website at www.sscip.org or ask your insurance agent about protecting your organization with insurance coverage through Skip.
Well, we're back with Southern Arizona's nonprofits, superheroes impacting our community. And if you've been listening, you would certainly agree these are two superheroes for sure at our table today. And we were just listening to stories about sex trafficking from John, and then we're going to talk some more with Anthony about what SALA is doing, because of course they're helping. Southern Arizona Legal Aid is helping a lot of different people with a lot of different things. And Anthony, I was very impressed with your long list. Your board is very, optimistic. And boy, you have to address how many staff members do you have to deal with all those different areas of law.
We're down a few staff, but right now we're 65 staff with about half of the staff being lawyers. And we're spread out in 9 counties and 4 of the 11 reservations that we cover.
Gosh, that is crazy. And then thankfully you do have some pro bono attorneys, is that right, that you can refer? So
that's right. We have a cadre of up to 100, maybe more now, lawyers that volunteer their time to help our clients. The way we're set up is our staff lawyers take the more difficult cases, and we ask our volunteers to help us expand our footprint by helping those folks who can help themselves. We have clinic programs where we have volunteers who come in and teach self-represented litigants how to represent themselves in court without a lawyer.
And that's kind of challenging. I know a couple of people that we've sent to SALA have gone that direction. So it is interesting. And at first, I think they don't feel at all confident in doing that just because of their record. I mean, in how they've come through their relationships. But I think it also helps them become more aware of their rights, or they feel a little more confident, a little stronger, that they know that there's help and that they actually have some ability to defend themselves.
Right. So part of our mission is to empower our clients. And so we screen such that clients that we believe can handle the divorce on their own, there's not significant domestic violence, then we teach them and basically hold their hand. We have volunteer lawyers that hold their hand and walk them through each step. And our goal is, because with family law cases, they can oftentimes go on for years, there are children involved. And so if there's a need to go back to court to modify parenting time or child support or something that came out of the marriage, then that person knows how to go back to court on their own without having to come back to legal aid. And we've seen that happen.
Oh, that is good. I've seen that in some of our clients, so that's pretty cool. I think, what are you doing with the tribal communities? How do you help there? I was surprised to hear you're in 11 of the 22 nations.
Yeah, so the legal services is unique. Our goal, as I mentioned before, is to fill the void and the justice gap in our country. But often, tribal communities oftentimes do not have the legal infrastructure that the states have. And so legal aid's role is to fill that void again, providing civil legal services to tribal members in tribal court. And for us, that means the family law cases that I've talked about, they don't have the kind of housing challenges on tribal reservations that we have in the states, but they have will issues. And so because of how tribal land was divided in this country, it is very fractionalized, so such that individuals will own a yard of land.
Oh, gosh.
Something you can't live on. And so we'll have families, and they'll each own several parcels, small yards. When I say parcels, these are small yards. And so we write wills with the intent of consolidating the property such that we can get it consolidated. Someone can now have a house built on it. So a lot of wills work, a lot of probate work we do on tribal reservations.
Oh, that's interesting.
We also are able to help tribes with their tribal sovereignty issues. And so we're able to help them address issues like around voting, elections, things like that as well.
Boy, you're really into everything. Gosh, who knew? This is very helpful. Thank you. And then you mentioned something about income earlier. So are there income eligibilities for people in Tucson in this region, or in all the areas you serve, all 9 counties? How do they know when to come for help?
Gotcha.
What tells them this is the opportunity where I should be calling SALA?
So first I want to mention for Arizona, there are actually 3 federally funded legal aid providers in our state.
Okay.
And our state's unique because of its diversity by way of population and geography. And so to the north is the legal aid program called DNA People's Legal Services. And DNA is an acronym for a Navajo word that I do not know. And they serve the other 10 tribal communities in our state. They're based on the Navajo reservation. And they also serve the population, the low-income population in Coconino County. The largest legal aid provider in our state, and our funding, by the way, is provided to us based on the poverty populations in our respective service areas. And our service areas have been defined by Congress.
Okay.
It's the majority of our funding. So Community Legal Services based in Phoenix is the largest legal aid provider in our state, and they cover 5 of the 15 counties. DNA People's Legal Services covers the 10 tribal nations and Coconino County, and the remaining counties Southern Arizona Legal Aid covers, and the 11 tribes.
Oh, gosh, I can't imagine. So if I'm living here then, and what's going to be, because you had so many things, housing, veterans, how do I know I should be calling you? I have to have a certain income qualification?
Yeah, so there are income eligibility guidelines, and basically, to be eligible, one needs to be at or below 250% of the federal poverty guidelines.
Okay.
And that's because we have a variety of funding. Our federal funding, the income level is a lot lower. It's 125% of the federal poverty guideline. But the state of Arizona provides us with funding, and Pima County and the city of Tucson, that allows us to serve populations with higher incomes. So the first thing I recommend is if one has a civil legal problem or believes they have a civil legal problem, they should then go to our website, azlawhelp.org. Our website is a website designed to provide legal information to people so that they can determine whether they have a legal problem and where to get help with that legal problem. They can also apply for legal aid services on that website, and based on their zip code, they're sent to the appropriate legal aid program. And so I always recommend, the ABA did a study and the Legal Services Corporation a number of years ago on the justice gap. And those studies concluded that 6 in 10 Americans have a civil legal problem that goes unaddressed. And most people don't address their civil legal problems, obviously because they cannot afford a lawyer and the hourly rates that most lawyers charge. And so those civil legal problems tend to become acute. And when they become acute, then it's when they're coming into the legal aid office. And so we try to get upstream by the legal information website I alluded to. We do work with a number of nonprofits in town where we offer community education presentations. These presentations are designed to not only educate the community about legal aid and the services we provide, but we also provide substantive presentations where we will give a presentation on a tenant's rights and obligations in a landlord-tenant relationship, one's rights in the area of family law when it comes to dissolving a marriage, things like that. So it's an attempt to educate the public about their rights and obligations ahead of time so that they can get to us before the problem gets acute, and better yet, they can resolve the problem without having to come to legal aid at all.
I bet you're busy right now with tenants' rights.
We are busy with tenant right. Unfortunately, family law cases have been up, and we're just finding we're having to go to court more because the violence seems to be more acute. One of the things that happened during the pandemic was the isolation when we were closed down as a society. Then people were left in homes with their abusers.
Yeah.
And a lot of that now is just beginning to come out. And so we've certainly seen an uptick in people needing help in family law, and just housing cases have just gone through the rough. It's just been.
We've seen that at Impact, just the people coming in with for help from our services. They're just surprised. It's surprising to hear their stories and find out what's going on. And then the housing right now, back when the idea of an apartment was you could move into an apartment and save money for a down payment. And you used to have to, what was it that your income didn't have to be very much, really?
More than 30% of your income back then. Now it's 40% or more.
It is crazy. I know our son was looking to move back to Seattle. He was here temporarily during COVID because it was driving him crazy to be in the far northwest when all those things were going on. So he came down for a short 6 months and stayed for 2 years. And he was saying, it's amazing because to go back to Seattle where the price of housing is really crazy, an apartment is $3,000. And I know even in Phoenix, you're getting into those ranges. But he said the hardest part is to qualify, you have to make 3 times what the rent is. And what we're saying, so he was saying, so that means for a $3,000 a month apartment, I have to have a $9,000 to $10,000 a month income. And he said, how many people, in Seattle where you're in IT, it's doable. And he's in IT, but he was saying, how do people survive and how do they even get into that housing? And we're finding what's happening is people who have leases that were affordable when they got into the lease, now they're getting kicked out. Their leases aren't being renewed. And so suddenly they are having to go out and find new places to live where they're requiring so much more income.
Yeah, we're seeing a race to the bottom in the quality of housing. So what happens is one's lease, they're not able to pay the higher rent, and so they look for a place that's more affordable for them. But then the quality of the housing is not as great as it was the place they had before. And so we're seeing people move into more dilapidated, uninhabitable housing, and of course, more people falling into homelessness.
Yes, and I think that's the hard part for us is we're looking at, well, where are the affordable housing units? So, well, you guys will be very busy, I'm sure, but we sure appreciate all the services you do. And that education is good for people to know. They can go to your website. And on the show's landing page, we have all of the organizations' contact information. So everybody's website is there, social media, ways to follow, phone numbers so that you can reach out to these organizations. And I wanted to ask John also about, with movies like The Sound of Freedom coming out, sex trafficking is kind of out in the community as a topic of conversation. And so can you tell us kind of what that's about for people who haven't heard about the movie or how it relates to what you're seeing?
Yeah, and Sound of Freedom has actually been a blessing, right? For us, the sex trafficking was something that just wasn't readily talked about. It was kind of that thing. And I have kind of an analogy. My grandma was somebody that she wouldn't say something bad out loud. She said, she'd talk about, oh, did you hear Aunt Betty has cancer? And she wouldn't say it out loud. And that's kind of what I think is analogous with how people think about sex trafficking. It's just something that's not pleasant to talk about. It's not out in the open. It's not something that, and therefore people aren't actively trying to help with the scenario. And Sound of Freedom really provided us that sounding board. It kind of highlighted on big screen and in mainstream media that there is such thing as sex trafficking. And it's not just international, it's local, and every person has a story and how that person is rescued or how it can happen. The Sound of Freedom really provides that outlook, and so people now are appalled by the fact that this is happening in our communities, it's happening in our world, and they're turning to organizations like ours and saying, how can we help? So that's been an absolute blessing for us. The challenge that I have with Sound of Freedom is that it tells the great story of how somebody was rescued, an individual was rescued, and that's great, and it highlights a very important part of the procedure, which is or part of how somebody gets to ultimately being rescued, which is the teams that go in and actually do the rescuing, do the research, and try to find and then help. But where it ends when the movie credits start to roll, that's really day one for somebody's healing process. You're talking about years of need, and this is the trauma that's associated with somebody that's been trafficked, kidnapped, or whatever their story is, taken from a bus station or become homeless and then have to find a way to provide. It's the trauma that is associated with that takes a long time to heal. So the rescue is great, and again, I really am appreciative of Sound of Freedom for bringing it to everyone's attention that there is an actual problem. But then we now need to talk about how do we help those that have been impacted, because as I mentioned earlier, there's only a fraction of people that have been affected by this that are actually coming forward. So the problem is way bigger than we'd ever even consider, and there's not any help coming for those people, and that leads to long-term mental health challenges, and it's an impact that kind of recirculates right back into our society, and we end up, paying at some point the price of inaction now. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah, Sound of Freedom has definitely opened a lot of people's eyes, and I am very grateful for that. And I hope people, if you haven't seen it, go out and see it, and then really think to yourself, okay, so where can I plug myself in, and where can I help in organizations that are helping the child that was highlighted in that movie?
And I think that's important too, because it's my thought would be that would be life scarring. I mean, I think it reminds me of veterans. So how will you ever get over something like that? Right. So it's not like it's even a 2-year instant recovery. So I think that's a challenge. But it's great because I think both these organizations, you probably could both use volunteers then.
Oh, absolutely.
What else do you both need from the community? Is SALA a QCO? Are you tax credit qualified, Anthony?
We are, yes. We are one of the what used to be called working poor tax credit organizations. And so we are into that season, and we're asking people, yes, to consider giving to Southern Arizona Legal Aid. We are one of the programs that are eligible for the tax credit. And so basically it's a short-term, no-interest loan to legal aid.
Right. And it's so important because it is such an expensive work you do. And for people who really can relate to these things. At Impact, we have a lot of people who've left Impact. They came as clients. They exited as successful people who've gone back to self-sufficiency, and they come back as donors, and they come back as volunteers. And I would think a lot of this would resonate with people who knew someone who'd been sex trafficked, or knew somebody who was maybe in that situation where they needed family law when they couldn't afford it, and ended up in a situation that was not as beneficial today as if they had that service at the time. So I think a lot of people would be happy to donate to SALA.
I'm surprised by the number of former clients of ours that actually give to legal aid. So they talk about how many years we helped them, or we helped a relative of theirs. And so it's just amazing that people do want to pay it forward and give back.
That's great. And then do you also utilize volunteers?
We do.
You said some, but I was thinking if I don't have a legal background, that's my...
Right. So primarily attorneys. So we're primarily looking for the skills of the professional attorney community. We do from time to time use non-attorney volunteers, but yes, primarily attorney volunteers.
All right. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of attorneys out there.
There are a lot of it. And Tucson's just a giving community. It's just so many people come down and volunteer their time to help our clients.
That is wonderful. I love to hear that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then, John, you too. You must be a QCO, are you?
Absolutely. Yep. We are a 501c3, so every donation is tax deductible.
Sure. And your organization probably gets to utilize the tax credit in the state of Arizona.
Yes.
That's fantastic, because I'm sure people will be able to relate to both these topics. It's really about people struggling at the most basic level.
Absolutely.
If you don't have housing, if you're a veteran. I did want to come back, Anthony, and ask you about the restorative justice, because I think this is such a big thing for people. So maybe you can explain to the audience what that term is, what that means.
Sure. So restorative justice is about helping people who have made mistakes in their lives recover from those mistakes, and then be able to go on with their lives. And by going on with their lives, being able to fully reintegrate into society. And what that looks like is a person fully participating in elections, participating in the decisions that we make as a society, paying taxes and all of those things. And so what we're doing is helping people get those criminal histories either expunged or set aside. And then we're having those, their civil rights restored. And so it's that last piece of someone recovering from a bad decision or a bad choice in their life to help them get to that full recovery.
And that's important, because I see a lot of clients who have that record in their past, and it's like they don't feel like they're human, and people don't always treat them that way. So I think it's similar to the sex trafficking thing, honestly. It's once you've had that determination and it sticks with you, it just changes the person, and it's really sad to see their self-esteem kind of wither away.
Yeah, well, and you alluded to it earlier. People can't get housing. It's tough to get jobs. You have to affirmatively disclose that on each application, job application or now housing application. And so having those histories expunged or set aside, then that means the person doesn't have to put that on their application. And so it just puts them in a different position when they're set aside, and particularly when their records are sealed.
We'll have to come to Sala and get some information to put in the lobby about these programs, just flyers, and even from the ranch, because I think that's the awareness is what we're trying to build on these topics. And I think that if we have so many people come through Impact. Last year, we had over 4,500 different people come get food in the last 12 months from Impact. So we have flyers in the food bank, we have flyers in the lobby, and even donors and volunteers who come through, we see them taking flyers for people they know or family members. So
we'll make sure we get you some flyers. We just hired 2 outreach paralegals, and their jobs will be to go out to the veterans community and let them know about legal aid and our services with an eye towards bringing them back so they have an opportunity to receive all of our services. And the same with ex-offenders needing to have their criminal histories set aside. It's reaching out to that population, letting them know about us, doing applications for services on site. And so certainly we'll make sure that we get you the brochures. We're just launching these programs as we speak, and we are 1 attorney short of being fully staffed. And so
that's exciting.
We're actually going to have a
It's hard to be fully staffed right now. Everybody's having that issue.
Yes, indeed. We found people wanting to do this kind of work. So it's been interesting with people that veterans backgrounds or have veterans in their family. Wanting to help this population. We're also convening a roundtable of veterans or people who are sort of prominent in our community who care about veterans and want to make sure that justice issues with respect to veterans are addressed to help us understand that population, be able to work directly with that population so that they understand us and trust us as lawyers so that we can then help them address their everyday problems. So we're really excited about getting this project launched.
That is exciting. So, the New Year's coming. So what a great way to open it. And then also, John, about volunteers, do you have work that you have to get done at the ranch where volunteers can paint and...
Oh, absolutely.
I saw something not too long ago about a lot of activity going on there.
So we're actually at a full sprint right now. We just, in November, acquired a new property, and we're rapidly trying to get it operational as soon as possible. So right now through probably the February, early March timeframe, we need a lot of help, a lot of manual labor. Volunteers make up a large portion of our ability to get all these things done. We're solely funded based off the generosity of our fellow citizens. So we try to be real good stewards of our money, and we turn to the volunteer community as much as possible to help us. Right now we have I don't even know the number, but a couple hundred projects going that we need to get done before that facility is up and operational. I posted them on our website. People can feel free to go there. It's beautyfromashesranch.org. That's one word, beautyfromashesranch.org. And take a look at our Getting Involved tab, and it'll kind of detail what is needed, and it changes every day that we complete a project. We put more on there. So if you don't see something on there that you like, just go back. There'll be something different. And for those that are thinking about getting involved and wanting to actually get some hands-on physical labor done to help us be successful in our mission, just keep in mind that security and safety of the individuals that we're trying to help is our utmost priority. So there are a little bit of probably additional steps that a volunteer might not necessarily go to if they go to Impact or St. Mary's Food Bank and so forth. We require a non-disclosure agreement, a waiver, and again, that's all meant to protect the identity of the facility and keep people from knowing where to go to find survivors that might be there. So we put a lot of thought into that, and we need a lot of volunteers, but we're also very selective in who can actually come and help.
What about trades? Do you need plumbers?
Oh, yes,
electricians?
absolutely.
I mean, this town is full of those people too.
Yes, and we're fortunate to get to work with. Anthony mentioned it. There are so many giving people in this community, and I'll just name a few just because they've helped us out. Tucson Stucco, Javier from Tucson Stucco has been a huge supporter of ours, and not only just direct support, but providing us contractors that can actually do things. With volunteers, it's great. You don't want necessarily a volunteer who's never done anything more than plug in a light, become your electrician, right? So
Sure.
we need the right people to do
They
the
often
right jobs.
think they can.
Yeah, people's hearts are a lot bigger than they're
Exactly,
willing to
because they
admit,
want to be able to help.
Exactly.
Yes.
So we do ask people, if you're going to volunteer for something, make sure that you're qualified to do that. If you don't belong on a roof, reshingling a roof, don't get up there.
There you go. I tell my husband that all the time. I said,
yeah.
we don't need to be risking our lives.
I probably don't listen to that myself. I do a little bit more than I think. But yeah, there are tons of things where people can plug in directly, and of course financially, we need financial support. Again, what we do, and you think about going to a lawyer or a psychologist, the dollar per hour rate to get services is astronomical. And when you're trying to help a large quantity of people, our services become very expensive very quickly. And we're doing multiple houses on the ranch, and houses are expensive in general. The property is expensive. The maintenance is expensive. Everything we do is expensive. So if people just want to help by donating, we certainly appreciate that. We need that. We're not ashamed to ask for it. So if somebody's sitting there waiting to find something to do with their money to get the end of year tax credit, beautyfromashesranch.org, donate is a great place to go. Also, I encourage you to visit Anthony's website. We're now the best friends, and I'm going to be using Anthony quite a bit. I'm sure this is great to get that connection, because I didn't know Sala existed, and what a blessing.
Well, that's the whole point of this show. So I appreciate having you both. And we are so glad you were here today. And is there anything else you want to add? Any last thing before we say goodbye to our listeners?
Well, we just want the community to know about legal aid and the work that we do, and that we're available. And so I always say, if you feel like you have a legal problem, start with our website, azlawhelp.org. That's a very good place to start. And we offer anyone who's eligible for legal aid, they will get a 30-minute to an hour consultation with a lawyer at Legal Aid. We'll go through their legal problem. And if there's a there and the case is in our priorities, then we'll provide what we call extended services, and that can be all the way up to going to court with the client.
Perfect. So it's a great place to get started. All right. Thank you. Well, thank you both. Thank you for coming today. And I'm sure the community has learned an awful lot about topics they didn't even know they didn't know enough about. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.